Welcome back, everybody. Another edition here of the Auburn Undercover podcast on the 24/7 Sports Network. My name is Nathan King. Welcome, everybody, into the pregame pod. Of course, it is Auburn's first division matchup of the season tonight at 6 Central Time on ESPN against the LSU Tigers. Auburn is actually looking to win 3 straight games in this series. It's kind of crazy to think about. Obviously, they won in 2020. That was the largest margin of victory in the series history for Auburn, 48-11 over LSU during that COVID season. And then last year, obviously, was Auburn's first win in Baton Rouge since 1999. So attempting to make a nice streak of it. They do get LSU at home, but LSU is about a touchdown favorite this week. The visiting Bayou Bengals are 3-1 on the season and also 1-0 in SEC play. To preview LSU here on the pregame pod, we bring in Glen West from Geaux247, our LSU sister site, of course. And Glen, I remember watching that LSU Florida State game in week one, and just some ugliness all around in that one. But it seems like LSU, at least you look at their second half against Mississippi State, you look at the second half against New Mexico as well. They obviously weren't super strong at the beginning of that game, but certainly seems like they maybe have their footing under them a little bit better than they were at the beginning of the season. Just what can you tell me of your general impressions of Brian Kelly in year one, now that we're a third of the way through the season?
Yeah, I mean, look, they've righted the ship, I think, a little bit more than people thought. I think kind of heading into this one, this is going to be really the first test, I would say, in terms of really seeing what this team can be on the road. We've seen it at home. They played fantastic in the second half against Mississippi State, as you alluded to. It really looks like quarterback Jaden Daniels has gotten his feet under him with this offense. He's becoming more comfortable. He's becoming more poised in the pocket. And he's really allowing the plays to develop for him. Early in the season, in that Florida State game, he was going quick decisions, but if his first or second read was there, he was flying. He was taking off. And I think what you really got a chance to see against New Mexico in that second half, in particular, was him being a lot more decisive with his decision making. That's something that Brian Kelly has told us this week of how much he's developed in really this last week or two is just the decisiveness in which he's making his decisions. He's becoming more comfortable as a pocket passer. And then he obviously has those legs to really bounce back off of and really use to his advantage in terms of moving the sticks and making big plays down the field. He's been really fun to watch the last 2 weeks, and I think LSU is finally starting to get the quarterback they were hoping to develop when they got him back in the spring.
Yeah, I guess for a little bit more on Daniels, he was able to beat out Garrett Nussmeier, of course,
Mhm.
in the preseason. It seemed like it might have been a rocky quarterback situation, at least for a little bit, when you had Miles Brennan choosing to retire from football. But like you mentioned, it seems like Daniels has settled in nicely there. He had a decent test in week one against Florida State, but tell me a little bit about what LSU has going in terms of the passing game and the receiving core. We know that Kayshon Boutte is supposed to be one of the best receivers in the SEC. From what I can gather, at least looking at it from the exterior at the beginning of the season, maybe hasn't gotten off to the most explosive start in the world. I know he missed that last game for the birth of his child, I believe. And so, but they've got some other names. Malik Neighbors has had a good start to the season. Just what does this passing game do well, and how do you think they're going to be tested on Saturday?
Yeah, so they've really developed, I think, over the last couple weeks in particular. Kind of heading into the season, it was, the first week or two, you definitely saw a little bit of a feeling out process because they have really, I think, one of the deepest rooms in all of the SEC. You just mentioned Kayshawn a little bit. They've struggled to get him going for sure, but he is still one of the more explosive receivers in this conference. But really, the emergence of Malik Neighbors, particularly over the last couple weeks, we saw it all fall here at LSU and Baton Rouge. A lot of the media members that I've been talking to here locally, we were all like kind of going into the season thinking he could make an all SEC case because he looked that good. He's extremely great in terms of his direction and being able to move quickly on his feet, change of pace. He's great at high pointing the ball. And he's somebody that I think is really popped over the last couple weeks. He's shown a really great chemistry with Jaden Daniels. And that I think that has allowed, or what we'll get a chance to see is if that has allowed LSU to maybe have somebody else that defenses can key in on instead of just it being Kayshawn all the time. And so if they're able to get some of these guys going, Jack Besh is another name. He was second on the team last year in receiving yards and catches, and he was very consistent when Kayshawn was playing last year as well. So if they can get a couple of these guys going and get him to be a little bit more consistent, I think that really opens up the field for Kayshawn, allows him to get back to some more one-on-one matchups and where defenses really can't just key in on him, because if you key in on him a lot, that's going to open up the field for Neighbors, for Jack Besh, for Brian Thomas, Chris Hilton, all of these guys, Jeray Jenkins. They have a lot of receivers that they have trust in and think that you can produce at a very high level.
The hot topic around here, really, it has been for the past few seasons, but it's coming to a head this season, is offensive line play.
Mm-hmm.
If Auburn fans didn't already know the importance of it, they are quickly finding out that you can't do much on offense without a decent O-line. For LSU, I know they've made a little bit of history this year. First time in program history, they had freshman starters at both tackle spots. I know maybe they have a little bit of an injury to a guard spot at the moment. How strong have they been so far this season, and in not only protecting Daniels but setting up a run game, because they have a couple talented backs?
Yeah, so they're on track to have their fourth different starting lineup in these first 5 games, and so part of that has to do with the injury to Garrett Dellinger, like you alluded to. He was their left guard. Sounds like they're going to slide Miles Frazier, who is a starting right guard at the time, over to left guard, and they'll implant one of the veterans, whether it's Anthony Bradford or Tremont Shorts or somebody like that, into that right guard spot. But yeah, you mentioned the two freshman tackles. Really, they got the opportunity against Mississippi State to start, and they look fantastic. I mean, if you look at the analytical stats, the advanced stats, they have not only been two of the top, highly ranked tackles in the conference, but in the country. These last couple weeks, Emory Jones and Will Campbell, they are the real deal, and I think LSU is extremely excited about those guys. You kind of alluded to it as well. They've been able to open up the run game a little bit more these last 2 weeks. You've gotten John Emery back, who was a very highly touted 5-star recruit a couple of years back. He's been off the field for academic issues the last, really 18 months. It had been a while since he had played in an LSU game, but he's getting his feet wet a little bit. You got the Noah Cain transfer from Penn State. Armani Goodwin is a second-year player who was really popped early in the season. So they have some talented backs that they can use, but I think this is really going to be, a game that's defined by how well Jaden's able to be back there and be consistent with his arm in the pocket.
On the flip side, so like we talked about, Auburn not only has struggled along the offensive line, they are now onto who was their number 3 center in the preseason. Obviously, Nick Brahms retired from football before the season started. Then Tate Johnson, he's going to be out maybe for the rest of the season, a couple months at least, with an elbow injury. He's having surgery on Thursday. I guess as we record this, it's going to be he had surgery on Thursday. But now it's Jaleel Irvin at center. He really struggled against Missouri. And just overall, these past couple games for Auburn against Penn State and particularly against Mizzou, the ground game especially has just gotten no push at all for a guy like Tank Bigsby, who might be the most talented back in the league. You look at LSU's defensive front. I know they lost Mason. I know that was a huge blow for them in week 1. Other than the edge spots, I know about obviously Ojolari, and they've got good pass rushers there. How good is this interior still without a guy like Mason Smith? How scared of that should Auburn fans still be with the way their offensive line has been performing?
Yeah, so they've been surprisingly extremely efficient up front. I think kind of when they lost Mason Smith on that first drive, it was, oh my gosh, the sky is falling, and LSU is really going to have some trouble on the interior. But they've been fantastic. I mean, really, what's allowed LSU defensively to have so much fun up front has been the consistency in the secondary. They've been extremely disciplined back there, and you didn't really know what to expect out of this secondary coming into the year, because they are pretty much all brand new. I mean, transfers, freshmen, all those guys are extremely new. But I guess just getting back to the defensive line play, you got Jaquelin Roy, who's a potential first-round pick. You've got Mekhi Wingo, who was an All-SEC freshman last year at Mizzou, who's transferred over. He's kind of taken that interior role left behind by Smith. They have a couple other guys, Jacobian Guillory, Bryce Langston. Those are guys that they can kind of implement in rotational spots. But really, it's going to come down to those first 2 guys that I mentioned on the interior. And, look, Tank Bigsby is a guy that has given LSU fits the last couple of years. He is an extremely talented back. I think LSU kind of heads into this game knowing how important keying in on him is going to be. And I think that's going to start with the play of Roy, with Wingo, with Mike Jones at linebacker, with Harold Perkins, the freshman 5-star who they have coming in, has really been a great kind of piece for LSU the last 2 weeks. They've really implemented him well. And Matt House has called some really great games the last couple of weeks, their defensive coordinator. So I think they come in with a lot of confidence, but also knowing they got to stop this run game if they want a chance of winning.
When you look at, obviously they're on a mini winning streak, of course, getting past that Florida State loss, and like you said, sort of riding the ship. So there have been a lot of positives for them now heading into this division matchup, the second of the season. For them, what are some of your concerns though on both sides of the ball? Obviously, they're still figuring things out under a brand new coaching staff, but what are some of the things that you've seen through these first few weeks that probably can't rear up in this game, or else LSU might have a close one here and have to take it to the wire?
Yeah, so concerns, I would say, kind of the offense falling back into what they were doing in that Florida State game where it was pretty much Jaden just running around for his life. I mean, the offensive line really struggled those first couple weeks. I think they felt like they've really kind of found a position, especially on the outside with those two freshman tackles. But this is another level. I mean, these guys are going on the road in the SEC for the first times in their careers. And those lights, and Jordan Hare, it's gonna be trouble if they're not careful. And I think the fact that this is gonna be, I'm not sure at this time when we're recording what the weather situation is gonna be like for this one. But LSU's been preparing all week, probably like that they're gonna be preparing for some rain, and so ball's gonna be wet. It's gonna be slippery. It's gonna be one of those sloggish kind of games where I think you're gonna have to be very run dependent. And the running game has really struggled at times for LSU offensively this year. They got it together last week against New Mexico in the second half, but that's not a great sample size. You got to really show it here against some SEC competition, and I know Auburn's got a really great front with Derek Hill kind of leading the way up there. So it's going to be important for those guys to really make sure they establish the run early. Defensively, I would say there really haven't been a whole ton of lingering kind of concerns. I would say they fixed a lot of that after their first week against Florida State, where they weren't able to get off the field on third downs. They've been really, really special. I mean, they pitched a shutout last week to New Mexico, allowed less than 100 yards. Yes, it's New Mexico. Yes, it's not a great parameter in terms of competition, but it's really hard these days for a defense to allow any offense under 100 yards and to completely shut them out. Offense is so tailored to college football now and its success. So, for defense, I think they come in extremely confident. They're going to get Jay Ward back. They're going to get Joe Fuchsia, the Arkansas transfer, to start at safety next to Greg Brooks. So there's some continuity issues that I think could possibly crop up if they're not careful. But this is a defense that's coming in with a ton of momentum.
Just overall, what have your impressions been of Brian Kelly? Obviously, the offseason was there was a lot of hype around him when he first came in from Notre Dame. Obviously, there's no debating his prowess as a head coach over the past decade. Then you had the the interesting sound bites that came out, and it's never dull over there at LSU, and Brian Kelly has definitely added to that. But I guess what are the biggest differences you noticed again early on in the season between the way he likes to run this program, the way things go on a week-to-week basis under him, as opposed to what you saw through a few years of covering at Orgeron?
Man, it is night and day in terms of just the preparation, in terms of the uh, I don't want to say professionalism, because Coach O was professional and was very, direct with the media, and it was pretty good with the media. But there's just an added layer to, I think, Brian Kelly coming in here. He has been so articulate in the messages that he's putting out there to the media. He's been articulate in what he wants his players to be thinking about and the way they want to, prepare for these games. He's been all about accountability since he's gotten here. That's been the big word thrown around since the early days of spring. And he honestly just has exceeded a lot of my expectations. I kind of came in thinking a lot like I think many other media members around the nation who hadn't really gotten a chance to know him. I thought he was going to be a little bit more stern, a little bit more kind of to the point in his answers, but he's been very just joyous and kind of just a really fun guy to talk to and be around and talk about football with. I mean, he always seems to crack a joke at one of our media sessions, and they don't always land. And I think we've seen that kind of over the social media the last couple weeks in terms of the jokes that are hit and miss. But he's been a really fun guy to cover here in year one, and I'm really looking forward to getting to know him and pick his brain a little bit more about football.
Yeah, it's good perspective by you to talk about what you see every day, because like you said, the stuff that circulates nationally, of course, is what everybody is going to see. So I guess it's good to know from his perspective that that not all the jokes are are the ones that we see. Although I still find those pretty hilarious.
Yeah.
The one a couple weeks ago was probably the best one I had seen from him. But I guess just overall in this game now, your thoughts on how this matchup might play out, what you think maybe a couple keys for LSU are to get a win here. Again, they're a touchdown favorite on the road against Auburn. It's been a while since you might have been able to say something like that, and I think it's a little bit more of an indictment of what Auburn has looked like early in the season. But you don't have to make a score prediction if you don't want to at this point of the week. Again, we are recording this on Wednesday. You'll hear it on Saturday morning, but just your general thoughts on how this matchup might play out on Saturday night.
Sure. I think this is always a tough matchup for LSU. Even going back to that 2019 season where they were just running through teams, Auburn had them on the ropes there for a good portion of that game. And LSU escaped with, I think, a 2-point win in that game, if I'm not mistaken. So this is always going to be one of those wonky matchups where I think LSU is they've just had some trouble with them. And so I do think that LSU has some advantages in this game. I think it's going to be really important for really both teams to get the run game going early, especially if there's going to be some rain in the area, if it's going to be one of those wet ball kind of games where you're going to have to really slug it out defensively. You want to get those running backs involved early. I think LSU found something last week in terms of how they were rotating their backs. I think it's going to be important for both teams to hang on to the football. I mean, I know that's a simple kind of key to the game, but when LSU turns the ball over, they are, it's just they don't have the offense, I think, to recover from giving up a couple extra possessions a game. And so they got to be very careful with the football. Defensively, you got to, stay in your keys, stay zoned up. I think you're going to see, whether it's Ashford or whether it's Finley, they're going to have a game plan for both of those guys. We were talking a little bit beforehand, but it sounds like Ashford is a guy who kind of gets out of the pocket and delivers some throws downfield. So, the secondary is going to have to really hold up. I do think it's going to be a pretty low scoring game. I'm kind of in the 26-21 range, 25-21 range. I think it's going to be a pretty close game. You go on the road, and any kind of win on the road in the SEC is a positive. And so whether it looks clean, whether it's a little bit more jumbled in terms of the execution, you just want to see, I think, both teams go out there and execute as best possible. And I do think LSU has a slight advantage in this one, but it's going to be a really fun game to be a part of.
Yeah, always crazy. Of course, we don't have to tell LSU and Auburn fans how weird this series is, and it just seems like the more ingredients you toss in, like the hurricane this time around, it just going to add to the weirdness and the craziness. Yeah, like you mentioned in 2019, I think that was I think Burrow had multiple passing touchdowns in every game the entire season, except for that one against Auburn, where they
Derek Brown is a different beast. I remember hearing about Derek Brown for that whole entire offseason, and he was absolutely the mess up guy in that game. He was the guy that effed everything up. So
yes.
that was
yep. And it was the second game of a couple. I can't remember if they were back to back, but they did the same thing at Florida where he was just throwing multiple guys around at the same time. He had 2 separate takeaways in that game, but their offense just couldn't do anything, and so it wasn't enough to get the win. But yeah, should be a crazy one. Should be a crazy environment. Of course, it'll probably be rainy and windy, all that kind of stuff. So who knows what the conditions will be like. Should be a great game though, Saturday night. So thank you so much to Glenn for hopping on today and giving our listeners some great insight and perspective, sort of a last minute fix here on LSU on the Pregame Pod. Thank you so much to everybody for listening to this edition of the Pregame Pod. If you guys enjoyed it, please go leave us a 5-star review. That's the number one thing that helps us out. The bumper music is by Beats by Mordecai. You guys can follow him on Twitter, SoundCloud, and Instagram. And until the next episode on Sunday, me and Jason will be reacting to the game, the LSU game on Saturday night. We will catch you guys later. Everybody enjoy the game. Talk to y'all soon.